Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination. Newsmakers, talking points. Thursday night, the big talking point. Donald Trump is stirring a controversy and we'll tell you why he's in the eye of a storm. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. Donald Trump stirs it up again, tells Apple CEO Tim Cook not to expand production into India. Says India can take care of itself. Reports suggest Apple will still go ahead with production hubs in India. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh in Srinagar lauds the forces on Operation Sindoor, warns Pakistan on nuclear bogey, urges global nuke watchdog to act against Islamabad. India's terror hunt caught up close on camera. Final assault on Pulwama terror hideout on cam. 6 out of 14 terrorists in the forces wanted lists are killed. Supreme Court slams Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Vijay Shah over controversial remarks against Colonel Sofia Qureshi. Hearing scheduled for tomorrow. No stay order given on the FIR. Pak Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif trolled and ridiculed for posing with tanks after an air battle in which India thwarted every Pak attack. Turkish firm operating at Indian airports loses security clearance after Operation Sindoor. Civil Aviation Minister assures action as pressure builds on Turkey after their support to Pakistan during the conflict. President Murmu asked the Supreme Court, can timelines be imposed on president and governors to clear state bills? Questions the 2-judge verdict. Murmu poses 14 questions to top court. MK Stalin slams the order, says court must remain independent. Supreme Court defers hearing pleas against the Waqf Act. Chief Justice of India B.R. Gavai says top court will not permit any challenge to the 1995 Act in pleas challenging the 2025 amendments. And Ukrainian President Zelensky says Kyiv delegation to attend peace talks in Turkey, sends defense minister to peace talks but says Russia not serious about the peace. But our top story, US President Donald Trump has struck again. Speaking in Qatar, the American president said he had asked Apple CEO Tim Cook not to build in India. Trump once again claimed that high tariffs had made it tough for US companies to do business in India, and in fact said India was now ready to do zero tariffs for many products. Trump reiterated that he had helped India and Pakistan agree on a ceasefire. With every day, Donald Trump is proving to be an embarrassment for the Modi government, even as India rejects his claims. Here is our top story on Trumpism.
US President Donald Trump bowls another googly at India, and this time on tariffs.
I had a little problem with Tim Cook yesterday. I said to him, Tim, you're my friend. I treated you very good. You're coming in with $500 billion, but now I hear you're building all over India. I don't want you building in India. You can build in India if you want to take care of India, because India is the highest, one of the highest tariff nations in the world. It's very hard to sell into India. I find it.
Trump's statement comes just 2 days ahead of Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal's trip to Washington, D.C. for trade talks. The American president has put the Narendra Modi government in a spot with his daily utterances, especially in his bid to take credit for the ceasefire between India and Pakistan.
I don't want to say I did, but I sure as hell helped settle the problem between Pakistan and India last week, which was getting more and more hostile. And all of a sudden you'll start seeing missiles of a different type. And we got it settled. I hope I don't walk out of here and 2 days later find out that it's not settled, but I think it is settled. And we talked to them about trade. Let's do trade instead of do war. And Pakistan was very happy with that, and India was very happy with that, and I think they're on the way.
Over the last 6 days, Trump has equated India and Pakistan, ignored terrorism sponsored by Pakistan, and offered to mediate the Kashmir dispute. The Modi government has rejected Trump's assertions. Foreign Minister S. Shankar broke his silence on Thursday.
Our relations, our dealings with them will be bilateral and strictly bilateral. That is a national consensus for many years, and there is absolutely no change in that consensus that dealings with Pakistan will be bilateral. So resolution.
Shankar also played down concerns on tariffs.
Said that the perpetrators between India and US, trade talks have been going on, negotiations have been going on. In fact, we have, I think a team is just going at this point. These are very complicated negotiations. They are very intricate. Nothing is decided till everything is.
Trump's repeated statements could be a ploy to put pressure on India. What would be the right way to respond to the US president remains the government's dilemma. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's raise the big questions right at the very outset again. Is the US President Donald Trump using trade as a weapon to arm twist India? Trump-Modi bonhomie, is that now under scanner? Should India ignore Trump's remarks? Is Trump's politics all about business first? Joining me now is Surjit Bhalla, who till not long ago was India's executive director at the International Monetary Fund and has been someone who's tracked the Indian economy for decades. Javed Ashraf is a former diplomat, has served in several global capitals. Siddharth Zarabi is editor of Business Today. I appreciate all of you joining us. Dr. Bhalla, I want to come to you first. How do you respond to when Donald Trump says, and we discussed this a few weeks ago when we did a roundtable on this, that he seems to suggest to American businessmen, don't go to India, first put all your money in America. And he's now telling that to the Apple CEO. How do we see this? Is this Trump just resorting to optics or something more?
Well, by now we should be, you correctly called it optics, and by now we should be getting, all of us around the world should be getting used to Trump. And, he changes his story and everybody accepts that he'll change the story. So not so long ago, he had said how India and Pakistan were engaged in a 1500 years war. So I think, this is part of the, I don't know whether to call it show or showmanship or brinksmanship or negotiation.
But if I may stop you, Dr. Bhalla, isn't there a method in the madness? Because Trump is pushing the idea of make America great again, and India wants to do make in India. Somewhere this was bound to conflict. Are those conflicts coming out in the open ahead of the big trade talks that will take place this weekend?
Yeah, okay. I happen to disagree with that point, but that point would be very valid if we were discussing China and the US. So both US and India have been affected by Chinese mercantilism, which is dominating world trade, especially world manufactured exports. Indeed, there might be some who say that the India-Pakistan war should really be called the China's India-Pakistan war. We should always look at economic events, political events from the lens of who gains the most. Now, clearly, China gains the most if there's friction between India and the US, because as you just discussed about him telling the Apple CEO that, look, don't move to India, when for, I think, a couple of years, there's been a big campaign from all sides, whether it is from Bush or from, whether it is from Biden or from Trump, about expanding into India. So suddenly, it was all fine until about 2-3 weeks ago, and the India-Pakistan event blew up. So I look at it from the lens of who benefits the most. It is China that is benefiting the most, and therefore just have that perspective. Same perspective applies to US-China talks in terms of China has nothing to lose, and US on manufacturing, I'll come to precisely that point, that US manufacturing has been hurt by China's mercantilism. India's manufacturing has been hurt by China's mercantilism. Talk to any Indian industrialist, And the first thing, they won't complain about the US, but they will complain, and rightly so, about dumping from China. So I think that's the perspective one should have. And just like, you know, in the final analysis, in the final conclusion, it will be the case that US and India will reach a trade deal. As Jaishankar said, this has been going on for quite some time. And I believe that trade deal would be very much to the benefit of India and to the benefit of the US. That's why it's a deal.
Okay. Let me bring in Siddharth Zarabi for a moment just to understand the aspects of this trade deal for our viewers. Siddharth, you just heard Surjit Bhalla talking about a win-win deal. Is it a win-win deal, or is Trump therefore just squeezing India, arm-twisting India ahead of the deal? When he says, for example, publicly that India has already agreed to several good zero tariffs, what is Trump doing?
Well, this is another episode of Trumponomics, and there is anything economic in this argument. The biggest U-turn that President Trump has made is with China. And between this bluff and bluster, Indian officials and the political establishment are keeping very calm and seeing through it. What is likely to happen, Rajdeep? We know that Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and our designated negotiator, the Special Secretary of Commerce, are set to leave for the United States practically in a few hours. It's a 4-day visit where the actual substance of the talks will happen. You're absolutely right. If the president of a nation which is going around the world seeking to renegotiate the global trade order of the last 40 years is going to cause political embarrassment to a visiting country by saying that they have promised to drop tariffs to zero, that will never happen. He could dream, he could become the president of the United States 20 times, we don't care. That is never going to happen. It will never be zero. Never, ever, on agriculture, on goods, or on services. The facts that President Trump is possibly given by his officials, very, very disappointing. He says number 30th for exports. We are the fourth, they are the fourth largest after Russia and China and one more. Every single statement in the last few days, particularly, and I will end by saying, Rajdeep, you've been longer tracking global developments. Have you ever heard the President of the United States try and diffuse a potential conflict of the highest order by bringing trade? Do you think India will sort of agree to peace with Pakistan for trade? I mean, I don't know what he is being fed in his daily briefing notes, Rajdeep.
That's Trump, Trump likes to shoot off the hip, but Javed Ashraf, this poses a peculiar challenge, doesn't it, to Indian diplomacy, that you're dealing with a president who day by day makes on-record statements that are embarrassing. We can start with the fact that he virtually went on Truth Social, the social media site, to announce the ceasefire, then claimed he was ready to settle the 1,000-year Kashmir dispute, then linked it to trade, now says Apple doesn't need to build in India for the world, only build for India. Is Indian diplomacy faced with a rare challenge in how do you respond to Trump, or do you not respond to him at all and allow the surround sound, the noise to take over?
Rajdeep, I think government has clarified its position as clearly as it can in a very measured, factual, professional tone. I don't think we have to match President Trump's rhetoric and take this into a different domain. We are very clear, and I wanted to particularly bring in some elements of history into this. There is no way there can ever be either a third-party mediation in India-Pakistan issues, or any linkage between this issue or trade or any other geopolitical issues between India and the United States. And, first of all, I want to point out, despite all the noise that is made, in my experience, and I've dealt with this with the United States from 1999 onwards for more than a decade, that this was perhaps the most minimal level of intervention or involvement of the United States in this conflict. I mean, you would recall, I do recall, 99, there was such frenetic movement between Islamabad and Delhi and conversations. Same thing in 2002. And there was this continuous breathless sort of shuttle diplomacy going on at that point of time. US needed Pakistan for the sake of the war in Afghanistan. There was some pressure on us, but we didn't relent at all. In fact, we changed the agenda to the dual-use technology, space, nuclear cooperation, and that is what eventually led to the defense framework, the NSSP, and eventually the 2008 nuclear agreement. Similarly, when Obama came right after the Mumbai terror attack, if you recall that interview he gave to Time in October 2008, that the road to peace in Afghanistan lies through Islamabad and Delhi, and he wanted to make Holbrooke a special envoy for all three countries. We told him this is the kiss of death for the relationship. He backed off. And when he came in 2010, we had already moved on to some very important issues, including trade. Many of those trade issues still continue to persist. But we had also, remember, in 2010, got the first endorsement for India's permanent membership of the UN Security Council, as also a US endorsement for India's membership of the 4 export control regimes, besides the fact that we discussed CLND and civil nuclear cooperation. So this has been the pattern. I think what we are going to do is to convey clearly and in no uncertain term that India-Pakistan issues are bilateral. You remember what late Jaswant Singh said, we are two countries that speak the same language. We don't need an interpreter. And that position still holds, as Dr. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, said, there is a national consensus on this issue.
Yeah, but that was, Javed, with due regard, that was a pre-Trump era. I mean, Javed Ashraf, we are now dealing with someone, and if we don't have a dialogue with each other, we say we want to have a bilateral, but there is no bilateral dialogue. And you've got Donald Trump, who's a deal maker.
Let me come to this. So for both countries, it's important not to be distracted by these issues, because we have a very broad ranging agenda. We've got trade, and there will be discussions beyond what is being said publicly. It's a complicated, complex set of issues. So we will be working towards a trade deal. We will have issues relating to energy. There is from civil nuclear energy to hydrogen to renewables to fossil fuel. We have technology, industries of the future where we need to work with the United States, and we are in semiconductors and critical minerals and clean energy, and of course in defense technologies as well, where of course I would like to point out that we will have certain limitations and restrictions because of sovereignty and strategic autonomy issues and the nature of technology transfers. But both countries have a very broad range of issues to discuss. We'll let this noise settle down, and then we will move forward. But recognizing...
So you're saying we are at a completely different level to Pakistan. Am I correct? Net. The United States does see us at a completely different level to Pakistan in your view.
It has always been the case, and I wrote about it after this, before this war started, that whenever there is this terror attack and the prospect of a conflict, 3 things inevitably happen. Number one, that the attention shifts from terrorism to prevention of conflict. Second, it is always put in the context of the long-standing issue of Jammu and Kashmir or the dispute between India and Pakistan. Third, there is a tendency to then equate India and Pakistan and the aggressor and the victim in this particular situation. But it's always been the case. But this is a short-term situation that soon yields to the broader, longer-term objectives of the two countries. And during the course of these 25 years of this extraordinary transformation of India-United States relationship, we have seen moments where we've been distracted by the Pakistan issue, but we have been able to navigate past it, focus on our broader agenda. And I think what is important for us is not so much on whether we will move forward, but what is important for us to understand is what exactly do we want from the United States? What exactly can the two countries do? Sometimes I think we invest much into it and sometimes too little into it. So once we have that clarity on how United States can play a role in India's transformation, and I have a...
Let me take that, Javed, stop you and take that to Surjit Bhalla. The role that India can play in the US is, the role US can play in India's transformation. You were with the IMF for a couple of years. There's been a lot of criticism, of course, of the IMF that the loan to Pakistan has once again been extended. But that apart, the United States' role, do you see Trump having any clear vision for India beyond seeing India as another business opportunity? You see, he seems to, as we've seen in his trip in the Gulf, and the Middle East. He's putting business above peace. He wants business above all else.
And,
Or
we
peace through
have to
business,
look at
rather.
it within the optics that Trump wants to achieve at a particular point in time. And right now, he wants to achieve the optics of, he's upset that India sort of questioned his role in the peace agreement or in the stoppage of the war. So I think, in my view, that is understood by everybody. So that's why I call it optics. I have no doubt, and given what has been going on, especially over the last 20 years or so, starting from the nuclear treaty or nuclear agreement with the US, that India and US have so many similarities, and whether you want to call it comradeship or a union of those two democracies, we've all talked about it all the time. None of it has gone away. I do think the next decade, as the last 5 to 10 years, will be marked by a very strong relationship between India and the US. In 4 years or 3 years, Trump won't be there. But, this bond or this geopolitical inspired relationship, you look at the context, geopolitical context in the world, this is a surefire deal. Now, I may be wrong, it's a forecast, but I really think the juxtaposition of all the events and all the fundamentals are suggesting that this will be the defining international relationship. Now, we are just coming off Trump making the statement, no deal, India's offered zero tariffs and all of that. And, any economist that I talk to, and even non-economists, even foreign service officers, etc., they, politely brush that aside. That really it amounts to much ado about nothing noise. And that's how it is. This is international.
But you're saying that. You're saying that, but I just want to push maybe Javed for a moment on that. There is an asymmetry of power. You see, Surjit Bhalla says the next decade will be a defining decade for the Indo-US relationship, but there is an asymmetry of power between India and the US. And the United States, therefore, will push hard on the negotiating table when it comes to trade talks. And they will push us, as they also perhaps did, in ensuring that there was a ceasefire, if I may be allowed to use that word, between India and Pakistan. They have that leverage, in a sense, with both Islamabad and New Delhi.
No, first of all, again, I'd like to reiterate that it's fundamental, as between two human beings, you cannot force two parties, two countries to come to any conclusion if they don't want to. And I don't think that whatever President Trump may say or insist upon repeatedly, that was the case. I've seen this in even more difficult times than this, that we did not relent or bow to the US pressure on this particular issue. So I say this not simply because what the government is saying, because I've also seen this in the context of my relationship. Second, yes, there is asymmetry of power. And I do not believe in the hyperbole, with due respect to anything being a defining partnership of the 21st century. These are good for joint statements. We are living in a very fluid and uncertain world. We have left the old international order behind. We are not yet certain what we are getting into. There will be a complex set of simultaneous equations which will be playing themselves out. US-India relationship will be one of those relationships. We have other options. Asymmetry of power does not necessarily mean asymmetry of negotiations. And ultimately, it is about how we define our interests, how we look at the short term and the medium and the long term. And I think that's where we have to be confident that despite all the pressures, we have to be very careful that we do not do things that are irreversible or irretrievable, but that we reach an agreement that is a fair balance of interest. And I think, remember, once again, asymmetry of power is not an asymmetry of negotiating skills. We are also a country with an independent sovereign DNA, with a great sense of strategic autonomy, and we will also play our cards accordingly.
You know, Siddharth Zarabi, you've been tracking those negotiations. Do you believe that the deal is in the offing by July, August, or by August being the deadline? Do you believe the deal is in the offing, or is the Indian side under increasing pressure to meet that deadline?
There is no pressure on the Indian side. We have earlier today, just literally hours ago, heard from senior officials that India is now hoping for a bilateral trade agreement, and that's nuanced slightly differently from a free trade agreement, by fall this year. What seems to have set off concerns is the back and forth, including a comment by the US Commerce Secretary that it will take time. As far as India was concerned, there was never a quick fire deal in the offing. We did not go into this negotiation for a quick gun, Murugan kind of agreement. That's not the way trade negotiations happen in India. It may take a few more months. Certainly the waters have been muddied. But I just want to add one comment. What's the downside of things not panning out with the US? From an Indian perspective, we are concerned with our economy. There's a trade surplus roughly of $46 billion, Rajdeep, that we enjoy. If you look at the export basket, it's a certain kind of export basket. Maybe the US can replace us with sources somewhere else. However, even if we were to lose $10, $20 billion of that surplus, we have already started to diversify our trade relationships. After roughly a decade of looking the other way, we now have an early agreement with the United Kingdom. We are working a double time on many other negotiations. So it's not as if all our trading eggs are in Mr. Trump's basket. That is certainly not the case. We have plenty of options, and you will see Indian trade negotiators and the political establishment playing hardball of the kind that Mr. Trump is perhaps not used to these days.
Interesting. Siddharth Zarabi, Javed Ashraf, and Surjit Bhalla, I think all three of you have shown, you know, amidst all the noise, it's nice to hear three articulate voices trying to cut through the noise and decode exactly how the Trump-Modi equations might affect trade and, of course, the wider sphere of Indo-US diplomacy. I appreciate you all taking the time off to join me here tonight at the top of the news. Thank you so much to all three of you. Interesting, because remember, Trump's ceasefire claim had already triggered a political firestorm. Now with his attempt seemingly to link ceasefire to trade, the Congress party has turned up the heat on the center. The Congress today questioned Prime Minister Narendra Modi's silence, sought explicit answers from the Modi government. This comes after Trump also claimed, as I said earlier, that India offered a zero tariff deal to the US on a reciprocal basis. During the Congress Working Committee held yesterday, the party had demanded a special session of Parliament to discuss Operation Sindoor, a demand which the opposition remains divided on, with the likes of Sharad Pawar opposing it. But either way, Jairam Ramesh has made it very clear that the Modi government must come clean. Listen into what Jairam had said yesterday.
सीज फायर की पहली घोषणा राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप क्यों करते हैं? पहली घोषणा वॉशिंगटन डीसी से होती है। अभूतपूर्व है, ये पहली बार हो रहा है कि अमेरिका की भूमिका क्या है। क्या हमने अमेरिका की जो मीडिएशन बार बार आज फिर राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप ने दोहराया है, सऊदी अरेबिया से उन्होंने दुनिया को संदेशा भेजा है और अभी अभी सऊदी अरेबिया से कतर जाते वक्त उन्होंने वापस ये दोहराया है कि अमेरिका के वजह से और खास तौर से राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप के वजह से ही ये युद्ध विराम हुआ है। तो इस पर प्रधानमंत्री चुप क्यों है? मार्को रूबियो की वक्तव्यों और बयानों पर हमारे विदेश मंत्री जो दुनिया भर की बातें बोलते हैं, प्रवचन देते रहते हैं प्रधानमंत्री के माफिक, इस पर क्यों चुप है?
Okay, so that was Jairam Ramesh. Let's get a Congress perspective from one of their other leaders, Manish Tiwari, senior Congress MP, now joins me, former Union Minister. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Tiwari. During Operation Sindoor, we saw a rare consensus between the government and the opposition. Now that the operation is on pause or seems to be coming to an end, we seem to be seeing that consensus breaking down, particularly over the comments of the US President Donald Trump. The Congress wants Prime Minister to break his silence on Trump's comments on ceasefire, on trade, on Kashmir. What is the Congress party stand then?
Well, Rajdeep, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. Unfortunately, the United States of America has a rather unusual president. And so therefore, you have a gentleman who believes that back channeling is actually front channeling. And so therefore, you've had a series of statements which have come out from him, starting with the social media post on 10th of May, which was then followed up by an official press release by the Department of State from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And then during Mr. Trump's continuing tour of the Middle East, which is ending today, there have been a series of statements. So therefore, under those circumstances, it becomes difficult to discern as to what really is the import of those statements. Because if you analyze them one by one, there seems to be variance, at times contradiction in those statements. But having said that, it's very well documented in strategic literature that whenever there is a crisis or there's a flashpoint between two nations, other people do get involved in crisis management and crisis mitigation.
No, but you haven't answered my core question. Why is the Congress at the moment so anxious that Prime Minister Narendra Modi break his silence and in a way take on Donald Trump? It's almost as if the opposition at the moment wants to shoot off Donald Trump's shoulders.
Well, that's an absolutely erroneous read, Rajdeep, for a better word. After all, the President of the United States of America is the President of the United States of America. And therefore, if there are certain statements emanating from him, even if there may be some inherent contradictions, obviously, what really is the reality is something which the government of India needs to articulate. For example, as I was earlier pointing out, had it stopped with President Trump's social media post of 10th of May 2025, as was the case on the 28th of February 2019, while addressing a presser in Hanoi, he said that both the nations would pull back. Things would have ended, as I was earlier pointing out, that the United States has an unusual president. But what was extremely unusual in this case was the follow-up statement by the Department of State, which is the Foreign Ministry of the United States of America, which carried a very, if for the lack of a better word, a very pointed headline saying US brokered truce. So therefore, under those circumstances, obviously a rebuttal and putting the record straight should come from the political leadership.
Let us raise the other big question, Manish Tiwari, that the opposition, particularly the Congress, is raising. Your party wants a special session of Parliament over what's happened over the last few weeks, Operation Sindoor, Pahalgam. All allies are not on board. Some, like NCP, are saying there is no need for a special session. Why is the Congress party insisting at this moment for a special session of Parliament?
Well, Rajdeep, for the simple reason, whenever we've been confronted with a grave national security situation, Parliament, as the highest representative body of the Indian people, has discussed in detail and sent out a message of national solidarity and unity. It happened when the Chinese aggression had taken place in 1962. I remember, if I recall correctly, from the 7th of November 1962 till the 16th of November 1962, both houses of parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, had a complete discussion, even while the border war was playing itself out. Even during 26/11, if you would recall, since I had done the first presser on behalf of the Indian National Congress on the 28th of November in the evening, and the first congressperson who ever did a show was with you that night, Parliament was on. And during that Parliament session, senior ministers from the government, including the then External Affairs Minister, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, the Prime Minister himself, and other senior ministers had explained the chronology of events and the government's response. So therefore, it is not as if a parliament session is going to degenerate into a he said, she said. After all, this is the same parliament which in 1994 had passed a unanimous resolution that the only unfinished business of partition is the reclaim of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. That resolution was again reiterated unanimously by the Indian Parliament in 2012. So therefore, to extrapolate and begin on the presumption that a parliament session is going to be a he said, she said, I think is a completely erroneous premise.
You know, Manish Tiwari, you have given us a bit of a lesson in military history, but let me ask you as I conclude, Operation Sindoor itself. I had your colleague Shashi Tharoor on the show 2 days ago. He congratulated the Modi government, believed that the government had ensured that we hit the Pakistanis hard and smart, and he felt that it was the right thing to do. Do you also believe that the government has taken the right stand on Pakistan? In the UPA years, you were accused of strategic restraint, not doing enough. Now the government effectively is saying, "Humne ghar mein ghus ke mara Pakistan ko, hit them where it hurts."
Well, first of all, Rajdeep, every government takes national security decisions based upon the imperatives and the best information which is there before it. So therefore, you know, to compare two national security situations, I don't think is the correct way of approaching any national security issue. Having said that, in my estimation, the government did the appropriate thing, that they targeted and efficaciously hit the terror infrastructure in Pakistan. It was an attempt once again to establish strategic deterrence. And I do hope this strategic deterrence sends a salutary message to Pakistan that the use of semi-state actors in order to perpetrate terror or to use terror as an instrument of state policy is something which the government of India, the people of India, and by people I mean the entire opposition in India, is not going to tolerate at all under any circumstances. So yes, the punitive strikes were necessary. It was an imperative. And I do hope it sends that salutary message and establishes the conventional deterrence that we hope to establish in order to ensure that Pakistan refrains from using these semi-state actors.
Are you therefore, Manish Tiwari, going to give a word of praise at the end to Prime Minister Modi for sending out that firm message to Pakistan?
Well, I think, as I earlier said, every government acts in the best interest of the nation based upon the inputs that are available with it and the decisions it takes. So therefore, I have always been of the view that national security situations should not be looked through a partisan lens, and whatever is in India's interest, whatever serves India's strategic objectives, if they are furthered, you know, that's something which should be appreciated.
Let's leave it there, Manish Tiwari. I appreciate you joining us and in a way reaffirming your position as well as that of your party that you want a special session of Parliament on Sindoor and Pahalgam. Thanks very much. Okay. Meanwhile, Rajnath Singh, Defence Minister today, also stirred it up, saying effectively that making it clear nuclear blackmail by Islamabad won't work. The Defence Minister also said that international bodies like the International Atomic Energy Agency should actually be monitoring and pulling up Pakistan for repeatedly and rather carelessly raising the nuclear bogey every chance they get. Listen in.
आज आतंकवाद के खिलाफ भारत की प्रतिज्ञा कितनी कठोर है इसका पता इसी बात से चलता है कि हमने उनके न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल की भी परवाह नहीं की है। पूरी दुनिया ने देखा है कि कैसे गैर जिम्मेदाराना तरीके से पाकिस्तान द्वारा भारत को अनेक बार एटमी धमकियां दी गई हैं। आज श्रीनगर की धरती से मैं पूरी दुनिया के सामने यह सवाल उठाना चाहता हूं कि क्या ऐसे गैर जिम्मेदार और रोग नेशन के हाथों में परमाणु हथियार सुरक्षित हैं? मैं दुनिया के सामने यह सवाल खड़ा करना चाहता हूं। मैं मानता हूं कि पाकिस्तान के एटमी हथियारों को IAEA इंटरनेशनल एटॉमिक एनर्जी एजेंसी की निगरानी में लिया जाना चाहिए। मैं ये कहना चाहूंगा और साफ तौर पर कहना चाहूंगा।
Now, the Indian airstrikes on terror bases left many dead. According to government sources, more than 100. Among the terrorists killed are Mudassar Khadian Khas of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, who was in charge of the base in Muridke. Hafiz Mohammad Jamil of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, in charge of the base in Bawalpur. Abu Akasha of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, who allegedly was involved in multiple terrorist attacks in J&K. Mohammad Hassan Khan, the Jaish-e-Mohammed's operational commander in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And Mohammad Yusuf Azhar, the brother-in-law of Maulana Masood Azhar. And in fact, the Jaish is the one which has suffered a lot in that attack on Bawalpur. Remember, it was the Jaish-e-Mohammed which several years ago killed Daniel Pearl, a journalist, tortured and killed him. And there was a sense that there had been no justice given to the Pearl family. As we get reports of Jaish members being killed in the terror strikes, I spoke a short while ago to a very special guest. Judia Pearl is the father of Daniel Pearl. Mr. Pearl, I first of all thank you for joining me. India's Operation Sindoor, launched after that deadly Pahalgam attack targeting terror camps associated with Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, the very same terrorist group linked to your son Daniel Pearl's murder. What was your reaction, sir, when you first heard about India's airstrikes on those terror camps?
People ask me if this constitutes some sort of a closure, and I thought that it acts the opposite way. It really was a disclosure, which means it was I'm talking about the Operation Sindoor, was really an operation that called attention to the two other persons or criminals involved in my son's murder, and this is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Omar Sheikh. So I'm very grateful for Operation Sindoor for raising this issue and focusing highlighting the fact that two additional criminals still have not been brought to justice.
Several Pakistani officials, army officers were spotted, Mr. Pearl, attending the funeral of the terrorists killed in India's surgical strike on May 7th. Standing alongside them was Hafiz Abdul Rauf, a US designated global terrorist. What do you believe the message goes, what is the message that goes out when you see this about Pakistan's stance on terrorism, particularly in relation to Daniel's case?
I was surprised and saddened by this side. I saw the dignitaries, the government officials, I saw clerics, and I saw army officers, and I asked myself, I asked my friends in Pakistan whether this kind of message they want to send to their children, whether they want their children to revere whoever person they bemoaned. I was very surprised and saddened by that, and right. I don't think they meant it, or at least it was also saddened to my friends to see this site.
One final question, Mr. Pearl. In 2021, the Pakistani Supreme Court ordered the release of Omar Sheikh, the man many believe behind your son's murder. He was released from prison. Then U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken expressed concern over his acquittal, called up Pakistan's foreign minister. The terrorist was then shifted to another jail in Lahore. His death row was reduced to a prison sentence. How do you view Pakistan's claims of action against Daniel's killers? Have they really acted against them?
Well, that was another surprise for me, and we worked very hard to prevent or to work with the Pakistani Supreme Court not to allow for his exoneration. And I think it was the public pressure that eventually caused them to retain him in what they call a government safe house next to the jail,
right,
but not in the jail. So he enjoys good life now, and which is all, again, a wrong signal for the next generation Pakistanis.
That's right. Terribly wrong signal sent out when you're seen to be patronizing terrorists. Julia Pearl, for joining me at this moment. I appreciate you coming on the show. The Supreme Court has strongly criticized Madhya Pradesh Minister Kunwar Vijay Shah for his controversial comments targeting Indian Army officer Colonel Sophia Qureshi. The apex court refused to stay the FIR filed against Shah as directed by the Madhya Pradesh High Court. Chief Justice of India B.R. Gavai questioned whether such remarks were appropriate coming from a constitutional office bearer. The big question is, why is the BJP not sacking the minister who's known to speak out of turn? Here's more.
Trouble mounts for Madhya Pradesh Minister Vijay Shah. The Supreme Court on Thursday refused to give him any immediate relief on the FIR filed against him for the derogatory comments made against Colonel Sophia Qureshi. Chief Justice of India B.R. Gavai advised Shah to go and apologize. The FIR was filed after the Jabalpur High Court intervened. The High Court pulled up the state police for trying to shield the minister by omitting relevant sections under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Vijay Shah had sparked a row by referring to the soldiers' religion while commenting on Operation Sindoor that struck terror bases in Pakistan.
जिन्होंने हमारी बेटियों के सिंदूर उजाड़े थे, वही कटे पिटे लोगों को हमने उन्हीं की बहन भेज करके उनकी ऐसी की तैसी करवाई.
The minister, who initially defended the statement, later apologized.
हमारी बहनों ने जो अगर उस समाज की थी, उस समाज से ऊपर उठ के हमारी उन बहनों के सिंदूर का बदला लिया है, तो ऐसी सोफिया बहन के लिए हम सोच भी नहीं सकते. अगर उनको या किसी को भी मेरे उन बातों से कोई दुख हुआ हो तो मैं 10 बार क्षमा मांगता हूँ.
Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Mohan Yadav evaded queries on his minister's remarks. The Congress is turning up the heat on Vijay Shah.
जब से नरेंद्र मोदी जी देश में प्रधानमंत्री बने हैं, उन्होंने इस प्रकार का जहर घोल दिया है लोगों के दिमाग में, जिसके कारण भाजपा के नेताओं में होड़ लग जाती है. कौन ज्यादा हिंदू मुसलमान के बीच में नफरत पैदा कर सकता है. मैं इसकी घोर निंदा करता हूं और भाजपा के सभी नेताओं से अनुरोध करता हूं कि उनके खिलाफ कार्रवाई की जाए.
Meanwhile, Samajwadi Party leader Ram Gopal Yadav triggered another row by referring to the caste of defense officers who briefed the media.
योगिता सिंह हरियाणा की जाकर जमात और एयर मार्शल भारती पूर्णिया के यादव हैं.
At a time when India needs to put up a united front against terror, its leaders are letting down the country by playing caste religion cards. Bureau Report, India Today.
But let's end tonight with an inspiring story. When Pakistan shelled a madrasa in Poonch, the first call for help from the head of the institution went to his childhood friend, who happened to be a Hindu. Help reached promptly, and you found that on the ground, Hindus and Muslims, amidst the shelling from Pakistan, worked together. I want to leave you with this story in the hope that there is something special about this country. Is mitti mein kuch hai, which is different from any other, which is why we need to treasure it and preserve it. I leave you, therefore, with our ground report from Poonch today, with the hope that we will see better, more peaceful times. Kamaljeet Sandhu reports. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Good night, Shubhratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar. Take a look.
It is often the smallest gestures that echo the loudest. In Poonch, where heavy shelling recently turned a quiet border town into a war zone, one story emerged, not of hate or revenge, but of unity and unbreakable bonds. Amid the chaos, Rajdeep Sharma, a former BJP MLA, was captured on camera carrying injured children from the Jamia Zia-ul-Ulam Madarsa. The Madarsa had over 1,200 students, one Maulvi who died and 3 were injured.
हम सब दौड़ कर गए, वहां से हमने उनको बच्चों को उठाया, सबको उठाया, यहाँ हॉस्पिटल में लेकर आए। और एक आप यकीन करोगे कि एक आपने फोटो देखा होगा, किसी ने मेरी वीडियो बनाई है कि मैंने एक बच्चे को हाथ में उठाया हुआ है, तो वो उसकी ट्रीटमेंट कर रहा है। आप यकीन करो, कोई जगह नहीं थी उसको, मतलब हॉस्पिटल में जगह खत्म हो गई थी, इतने जख्मी इकट्ठे हो गए थे कि जगह नहीं थी कि हम नीचे रखें। मैंने हाथों में उठा के उसको हाथों में उठाकर उसका इलाज कराया। डॉक्टर आता है मेरे हाथों में, उसकी ट्रीटमेंट करता है।
The call for help came from Sayyid Habib, head of the Madarsa and Sharma's childhood friend since class 9th. A friendship forged decades ago, now tested and proved in Habib's hour of need.
बच्चे बच्चियां जो हैं हॉस्टल में रहते हैं, जो कि ये 2 इदारे हैं। तो हम उस वक्त एक तरफ तो गोलाबारी हो रही थी, हम परेशान थे कि किस तरह से हम जो है इन बच्चों को घर घर पहुंचाएं। जब इनको पता चला तो ये मुझसे पहले वहां पहुंच गए हॉस्पिटल में। इन्होंने जब देखा कि हमारे बच्चे और वो मौलाना साहब, तो इन्होंने हर एक बच्चे को गोद में उठाया और उस बच्चे को जो है इन्होंने जो है उन बच्चों को ट्रीटमेंट दी।
Hindu temples, gurudwaras, Christian schools and madrasas all bore the brunt of Pakistani shelling, but the people of Poonch stood together.
ये पूरे हिंदुस्तान को ये मिसाल जानी चाहिए। हमारा देश जो है इस मट्टी से हमें बड़ी मोहब्बत है, इस वतन से हमारी मोहब्बत है, इस देश को हम मजबूत देखना चाहते हैं। इस देश का फ्यूचर ब्राइट होगा, हम खुशहाल होंगे।
As Poonch begins to rebuild, the town sends a message of friendship, trust and unity. With Kamaljeet Sandhu in Poonch, Bureau Report, India Today.